All right, man. Another deep dive today. We're going to talk about why most SDRs will never get promoted. And this is coming from the lens of certainly our own experience, what we see in other people in the higher levels platform as well. But I think there's a lot of things as you start to have success as an SDR, you can let your guard down, you can focus on the wrong things. And in particular, there's really two major symptoms. You're maybe at, and we'll get to this, maybe at a company that just doesn't have opportunity to promote to AE, and we'll certainly talk about that. Or if you're at a very large organization, you get off to a hot start, but then when it comes time to promotion, and there's 200 SDRs of which 30 are up for a potential promotion, you're really missing a lot of opportunity and not doing the things that you should have been doing 6 months ago, et cetera, et cetera. We'll continue to break it down, but Chris, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah. No, this is a good topic, and I feel like it's one that we haven't really seen too much content on because it's kind of like a taboo topic. A lot of the times there's some things that are outside of your control, and so we really narrowed it down to 5 things, which are like the big key pillars. Like if you don't have these in order, there's just like a very, very low likelihood of you getting promoted. Yeah. The first one is not hitting your quota. That's table stakes. Second one is not systematizing. So like, cool, maybe you're hitting quota 1 quarter, and then like you just kind of like let your foot off the gas. You don't have a system. We'll get pretty deep into that one. Not being selfish. You'll talk a lot on that one. Not spending any time on learning AE skills. So lots of top performers that just like are crushing it, that never really take the time to realize or develop some of those skills because they're completely different roles, right? We'll get into that one too. And then not having any upward mobility at the company. So that's kind of like, I don't think I've ever seen a single one that talks about that because it is very taboo. But maybe just to jump into the first one, not hitting quota. I think we both have pretty strong opinions on that, but I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, I think 2 symptoms here. I mean, for our mindset has been like, obviously you have to hit quota to even have the ability to promote. But also I think for the types of people that like we make content for, like we hope that's like the baseline bar. I think I see a lot of content that's like, change this about your cold call script and you can hit quota. Like we're always pursuing hitting 100% quota. Like to be honest, we're making content, what we hope, and give us feedback if not, is for like the top 10% of reps who want to do that anyway. Like that's the minimum standard. But also I think 2 things to keep in mind. If you're in a startup where you're an SDR and you're not hitting quota, but no one else is, and you're the clear number 1, that's going to be a dicey situation. We've seen a lot of people get trapped in where you are the number 1, but the company's always going to have the ability to say you didn't hit quota, and they're going to hire AEs externally. So again, maybe that's a preview towards the end of the conversation that we're going to have. But I think on the flip side, and there's right and wrong ways we can peel this back. I think one thing, new SDRs, they're so excited to get in there. Like we have someone at Elastic right now that's hitting 300% of their number. They're going to clear easily into the mid 100Ks this year. You're excited to be there. And a lot of people, quite frankly, I'm not saying you hit 100% plus or 150 or 200% of your quota 3 months in a row and you demand a promotion. But I do think a lot of people at these big companies don't leverage that when things are going well, and they think that just hitting 100% of quota is enough for promotion. And quite frankly, there's been times, more in my case as an account executive early on in my career, where I hit over 200% of my number. I had a blowout year. I was in the same role for a year and 3 months, and there was a clear role in front of me that they were just like, keep dangling the carrot. And I finally had to have a conversation point blank with my VP of like, listen, I have been at over 150% some quarters and over 200% most quarters of my quota. I would be promoted if I was at any other company right now, and I'm losing patience. And again, that's not something I do on a whim. That was over a year of buildup. But I think these are the things that I'd be curious your perspective on when you're actually hitting quota, how you leverage that to then really push forward.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate. So like 100%, it's all about timing, because I also see SDRs, they'll hit like 1 quarter. And then they'll think, okay, it's time, now or like even 2 quarters or even 3 quarters. Like, and so I think in your case, like it was like, there was a very, very strong, like you needed to get promoted. Right. And I think for a lot of SDRs, like maybe they'll just barely scratch the surface of like hitting quota. Right. And you'll hear these stories of like how some people get promoted really quickly. And realistically, when that happens, like, yes, you got to be a killer and you got to be like in the right spot. But a lot of people just kind of like tend to take that at face value and say, well, they got promoted in 5 months or 6 months. Yes, they're absolutely crushing it, but there are a lot of circumstances that you don't know anything about. And I think that creates kind of like a false pretense in some of these SDRs' world where, and it's so crazy to me because like they're literally complaining about not getting promoted within like 10 months or 9 months into like a role that doubles their salary. So I think like there's two sides of it. I see a lot of SDRs feeling like they need to get promoted right as they hit quota, right? Like obviously hitting your number is table stakes, but you can't just hit your number. You got to do it consistently.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the biggest mistake that we see a lot of people, like once they finally start having some success, now all of a sudden they're looking at different companies. They're like, you know, they want to go to a smaller startup, and it's like, chill, like you haven't been at the company for 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's tough too, because when you are crushing it, like there are a lot of opportunities in tech sales. That's why it's pretty cool to be in tech sales, but it can also be very, very overwhelming, especially for somebody like who's fresh out of college, have never had like these opportunities in front of them. Yeah. And now there's like people hitting them up on LinkedIn. They're at a really good logo. It's really hard. It's very, very tempting. So, but I will say, like, don't even start thinking about a promotion or getting promoted to AE, like until you've hit like 2 or 3 quarters. Yeah. Unless there's like literally just open spots everywhere inside of your org, and there's like a very, very clear ask from like upper management that like, hey, there is a spot for you. Yeah, it's a little premature.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Last thing, and as we've seen, it's like there's something about the 100K number. Like you could be a 90K a year SDR and over attaining and literally going to make 115 to 120. Yeah. But there's something about having a total OTE package over 100K that makes people make insanely stupid decisions. That's, man, I've got so many stories there, but honestly, I don't want to put anyone on blast. So maybe we go to the next one. Yeah,
it's pretty funny. So, but yeah, that's just table stakes, right? And I think like from there, I see a lot of people, they'll start hitting their number. Cool. They'll have like 1 month or 2 months or 3 more, whatever, like however their quota is structured. Maybe they have like 2 quarters of hitting their number. Mm-hmm. But the issue with them then is that they're spending so much time on hitting their number. Like they're not really systematizing. They're so like, all their stuff is manual, right? Like you only have so many hours in a day to where that you can like send so many tailored emails, call so many people, do so much individualized research on different people. And so I think that's a big key pillar of like what happens to SDRs too, is they get stuck in this, like, I'm not gonna say rat race, but they get stuck in all these manual processes where they don't have time to focus on like some of the things that they need to learn to go be an AE, right? And so I think that's the second part of it, is like actually very, very few SDRs take the time to systematize. They're just kind of like, oh yeah, why are we using Salesforce? Like, why are we using Outreach? And like, yes, I think a big part of that is that there isn't really good enablement on how to use these tools. But when I look at the top performers that get promoted the fastest and that are just like clear no-brainers, they're tapping into like their workflows, these tools much, much better than other people. Yeah. So that's, I think, and something that really helped me, especially like when I was getting started out, like I was doing a lot of work. Like I was working 12, 14-hour days in the beginning, and I just thought that's the way to go. Like I just need to brute first. Like if I work harder, I'm going to get promoted faster. Yeah. And then I kind of realized like at some point, like if I just decrease my quality a little bit, if I go from like a 95% qualitative email to 90%, and I can hit maybe like 200 people or more, like my output is going to be so much higher. And I started, chilling a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think maybe my experience with this as well, I totally agree, right? There's a few things that happen, and it even ties into our previous point. You put in like the first 6 to 9 months you're an SDR, you're going to put in more work than pretty much any other period of your career. I mean, there are certainly exceptions, but when it comes from like an effort to how much you're learning, right? And then as we were talking about, you start to consistently hit quota for 2 quarters, and everyone gets impatient and they're like, I want that 130K, 150K AE role. I'm hitting quota. This is so easy. And it's like, to some extent, that's kind of the point, right? But what happens is now you're looking at all the recruiters in your inbox. You're looking at this 120K offer to be the founding SDR at dogshit.ai, who has like no product market fit. You're getting distracted there. And instead, what's happening is you could be using that 2 to 3 hours a day to your point, systematize that work and free that up. Yeah. But what happens is you get halfway through the day, you open LinkedIn and we're going to prospect, and now you're looking at jobs and recruiters. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's 2:30. Let me spend the rest of the day finishing my activity. And then all of that time in the middle where you could have networked, you could have taken on different projects, you could have presented at a marketing meeting or your team meeting. These are things that you're missing clear opportunities on to continue to plant seeds and like show that you're ready for this promotion. I mean, a big key for me, like I promoted very quickly, so I don't want to act like a hypocrite here and say you've got to wait, 18 months, because I did do it in 4 months. But at the same time, like I was in a very visible role at the time that I was in office. It was right before COVID started. Ultimately did go remote, but I was around people all the time. And so I'm sure we'll break this down further, but I was leveraging these relationships at my company at the time, and at your company, you're going to find these different advantages. But for us, it was we had just launched a new product, and I'm literally on the phone 100 times a day talking to anyone and everyone about our new product. So I actually was uniquely qualified for the entire company to give them insights on what talk tracks are working, what things are going on, right? And so I'm using that opportunity instead of thinking like, man, I'm killing it here, I'm their best rep with their new product, I need a promotion right now. Instead, I'm spending that time talking to like an enterprise AE who's so far ahead of me, but I know is best friends with our VP of sales, and I'm giving him all the nuggets that I'm hearing. I'm finding opportunities for him, maybe one or two more than all the other AEs that I support, and I'm starting to actually work in and be methodical, systematic with everything that I'm doing. So I totally agree, and hopefully that adds, gives people other ideas of how to do that as well.
Yeah,
so.
And I think like you're not doing it just to like systematize, right? You're doing it so that you can free up time. And even like the act of doing that in of itself, like once you get, and you did it like just automatically, right? But like most people, they kind of spend like 3 months getting ramped up, and then they spend 3 months like figuring it out. They're hitting their first quarter, and like it's really easy to get, well, you do get used to like, your new way of life. Like when your day-to-day revolves around that, you don't really have too much urgency. Like, and it's also really cozy.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like SDRs, a lot of SDRs will complain until they become an AE, and then they're like, oh shit.
Then you're not making commission for 6 months, and you're like, yeah, I miss the good old days.
Should I just have stacked 3 or SDR jobs instead of done this? Like, like literally like people will say that, and it's like, so I think even the act of like optimizing your time, like that is super important, because as an AE, you're going to have so much more responsibility. You're going to have so many calls. You don't have time to like sit down and do research for like an hour on like, some random person who like opted into a webinar. Like you got to be super, super efficient. And so that's why you're doing it. You're doing it not so that you can just like put your feet up and chill, but so that you can use that time to actually learn. And you were in like the trenches and actually learning, doing it. But for most people, they don't have access to that. Right. And so you got to take it into your own hands. Unfortunately, like there are pros and cons to being in tech sales. And one of them is like, because the market is growing so quickly, this kind of promotional path is not super like flushed out at a lot of these organizations. Yeah. And so like, but that can be a good thing and a bad thing. Yeah. Right. For you, it was a really good thing because you harnessed it super quickly. For other people that get really complacent and used to it, yeah, now all of a sudden they're wasting their time and they're like, why is nobody tapping me on the back for a promotion? Like, because it's not, that's not how it works. Yeah. And so like use that time, like, or free up that time, but then use that time efficiently. Use it on actually learning what the next skills are that you need to move into that next role. And then it's easier for you to make a case too, right? Like as you're connecting with leaders, as you're connecting with upper managers, like if you can actually say and show that you're already doing the job of an AE, which is tough. Like you can't go out and start closing people as an SDR. Yeah. But if there's just a little bit of initiative, right? And you've got two people, you have one person over here who's like 200% to their number, but that's all that they are. Yeah. And you have another person over here that's like 130% to their number, but they're doing all these extra things. Like the hiring manager probably doesn't even know like where they're at. They just know that they're both qualified. Yeah. And the only person that matters is that one person that's taken extra steps to actually move in. Because I can't tell you how many SDRs, and this is the problem, is they try to take a chance on SDRs internally. They do it once or twice. And a lot of this comes down to like having not fleshed out programs or enablement training or anything for SDRs that move into AE roles. Mm-hmm. But they do it once or twice and they have bad experiences. And now they think these SDRs probably aren't good AEs. Let's just go look at like externally. Yeah. So that's what you're up against, right? And it's not a bad thing if you can harness it and if you can actually just like take matters into your own hands, because if it's not flushed out, if you do take initiative, you're one of the only people on probably a team of 15 that are doing that. Yeah. Anyway, very No,
I was going to say, segue, like honestly too, I'd say one last note, but I think this ties into our next point about, quite frankly, being selfish. Yeah. Like just to be clear, our perspective here at higher levels is that certainly like, I think the average person, when they think of like systematizing, is like, okay, writing cadences, like scripting out everything, all this. And maybe there's a small portion of it that does include that. But I think where oftentimes people miss is actually in the quality of their reporting and use of the internal tools. Like there is so much data at your disposal, whether it's like what the top performing SDRs are using. You can find that through like ways that are not gated, but nobody really knows about. They don't spend time to dig through platforms. And also certainly it sounds basic, but in Salesforce, if that's your CRM, like actually creating automatic reports of not only old leads, close lost opportunities, but even inbound leads, actually taking the time, and this is something we preach religiously in SDR to AE Accelerator, is actually sitting down and breaking in the incoming leads by the lead type. because there are some that are just naturally more inclined to buy or at least have a conversation than others. And if you're not going down to the nuance of doing that, it takes a little bit of work up front. But then for the next 6 months, when all of that is automated, when you've created reporting and you log in the morning and you have 20 leads, you've got 5 that are your like most likely to be an opportunity. You attack those immediately. You break it down. Like these are all things that we get into depth. But I just want to be very clear, like systematizing is not coming up with a better script.
Yeah.
It's not collecting yet another like opener or another discovery question. Like those are, again, the basics that we're talking about that I would say of like hitting 100% quota. Like these are table stakes. So, but this also ties into being selfish. I don't know if you want to kick it off or I can keep rolling. But yeah,
I think that's exactly it. I mean, just be smart, right? Like it's not just about doing work. It's about doing work efficiently.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I also think like this is I think I say this too much, but like this is a good segue into the next one. But I think another thing is like no matter how much you work, this is something that nobody talks about, which I truthfully can't. Maybe it's like a taboo within the industry, but a lot of companies just don't have that upward mobility, right? Yeah. Like we talked a little bit about the dynamics of whenever you do have those bad experiences, whenever they've tried to promote a couple SDRs, maybe they just decided like, we're not going to promote SDRs. Like let's go for AEs, right?
Yeah.
External AEs. And so you have to like really be ruthless about this. You have to kind of like face reality at some point. And you can do this like analytically too, right? Like look internally, are your peers getting promoted? The people that were there before you for a year that are already crushing it and are top performers. What does that path look like for them? No. Like, you know, have they had a realistic chance of moving up? Have they moved up? Or is there anybody, like, is there any AEs that were internal promotions, right? Talk to them. How was that possible? Was it just like, oh yeah, 20 spots opened up and I was one lucky of them?
Yeah.
Or like, is there actually a path where you're at right now? So that's the thing that a lot of people don't talk about. They'll talk about, you know, all these like SDR to AE boot camps and like these programs and accelerators. And like we have our own, but we've actually also come to realize that like sometimes it doesn't matter how much you do, like how much work do you can literally like you can put in so much effort. You can be 300% to your number. You can be breaking every single record and it quite literally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like if they don't value you as an and this is a really touchy subject because a lot of SDRs will take this and say, oh, there's no path upward at my company before doing the due diligence and saying, well, okay, like have I actually looked internally?
Yeah.
Right. Or they'll just ignore the fact that there's like 5 people that got promoted in the last year. So like this is a touchy subject, but it is one that is very, very realistic. Like it's one that does unfortunately happen a lot. And I see a lot of SDRs continue to like put in time into organizations that just will never promote them.
Yeah.
And they'll keep saying like, they're just kind of like closing their eyes and praying like it's going to happen. Yeah. Like they promised me it's going to happen. You know, like they're dangling the carrot, that kind of pretty much. Right. Yeah. And so you do have to kind of like at some point really look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, like, am I just wasting my time here? Or is it better for me maybe to go somewhere else that has a proven path to get promoted? And people don't think about this when they first break in, which sucks. We try to really emphasize this for new people that are coming in, but they don't realize the importance of it until they're 10 months in.
Yeah.
So anyway.
No, that's fair. I think like on that note too, I mean, we have several examples. Like we've had people at really great companies, maybe border, like there's always exceptions to the rule here. So there's no, like you mentioned, there's no one hard and fast rule, but we had someone come into a very great company, no degree. They got 4 months of experience as a clear number one. And their management already got weird with them in terms of like changing plan and like payouts and all these different things. And then because of their performance, they got poached by AWS, who literally doubled their salary like right away. It's a no-brainer, right? And I think people envision that. They always, like the grass is always greener. That's an exception where it was. But I think if you're an SDR right now and in the situation Chris is describing, I think again, it's like basic check marks of hitting your quota or at least being the number one and being there for 9 to 12 months. And the reason I specify that specifically is if you start looking for other opportunities, which again is not as simple as watching this podcast and saying, I need to go somewhere else. Yeah. But let's say you determine that you have to make a move externally. If you start gearing up at that 9-month mark, you can make that move around a year. And then you do have, like, as petty as this may seem, you have a year of experience somewhere before you jump somewhere else to ideally avoid the sub 1 year tenure. So a lot of things there. And actually I want to highlight maybe on the other side real quickly too, going back to the previous point about like being selfish. I would say if you're at a big company in particular, or actually, I mean, really a company of any size, this is actually something I saw. I got promoted from SDR to AE in 4 months. And then I was a full cycle account executive. So I was still prospecting as an SDR, like basically half the day and then closing my business the other half. And I got really good at it. again, like I mentioned, I figured out how to sell our brand new company's product like before anyone else. And so for me, I was like, I'm not an SDR anymore. Who cares? Like, let me just share everything. And so, and this is going to happen if you're like a really high performing SDR. So you're 6 months in, you're 9 months in. The management is going to say, hey, look at Chris, like he's really killing it. Hey, Chris, would you mind sharing on your next meeting what's working so well? And then like, as an example, the VP of sales is going to even say, hey, we've got our QBR. We'd love you to present for 15 minutes on the trends you're seeing, what you're doing to work well. And this is a fine line, but it also goes back to the point we made on reporting versus creating cadences and all of these different things. I think it's one thing to give, like when we say be selfish, I think you've got to be careful about giving away your entire playbook. You definitely want to give valuable things to your peers, and I'll explain why this can hurt you in the future. But as an example, when people are asking what's working, all of these things, like in our opinion, I think it's pretty fair to say your AE relationship is a great way to get opportunities that people don't value, and also the reporting and use of CRM and capturing leads, and whether it's inbound or outbound, that's where people really don't spend the time. Most high performers will get there, but the average person is tweaking their messaging. They're listening to a cold call podcast and how do I tweak this another time, et cetera, et cetera. And so my point being here is like, when you're thinking about what to share, you can share maybe a strong performing message and insights, but never get to the point where if you found a report in your CRM of old leads or close loss opportunities or something, and you found a couple different filters and criteria that's just giving you absolute gold, those are the things I will say you need to selfishly protect. Yeah. Because I gave all of those, I was an open book, and in my case, I was lucky it didn't matter. I already had the account executive promotion, but there were several SDRs in the organization, and they all were like, okay. And it's funny, actually, with the messaging itself, everyone in our company started using my SDR emails and templates, and I actually started getting lower meeting rates because all the times I would go to hit up old leads,
everybody else
they had already just used the messaging, right? They'd already seen it. So I don't know if you want to add color on that, but I did just want to call that out because especially if you're in a larger organization, you're 6 to 9 months ahead, and you look at, you're giving a presentation to the new start group, and you're like, these guys are so far behind. I remember when I was there. You get a little confident. You start oversharing, and all of a sudden, what took you 9 months to figure out, the new guys are doing in 3 months. And now even though you're both hitting 150% of your number, you've lost any seeming advantage because, it took you 9 months. But check out Eric. Eric's 2.5 months in here and just hit quota. That's a record for our company. And he literally just I'm smart enough to just rip all your shit. So,
well, no, I mean, and that's a really that's a real thing. We had somebody else also on a live Q&A call the other day, and they've really dialed it in. They figured out everything, and they took it took them 4 or 5 months. And very, very nice guy, super, super, just really good vibes, right? And it was very obvious that if somebody came up to them and asked him about this stuff, he would have just given it to him. And he did. He literally gave them all the sequences and all the stuff that he had been working on for 4 or 5 months. And exactly to your point, he was crushing it with those sequences. But now when the whole team has started using them, now he's like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Now he has to find other strategies, right? He's kind of at the expense of all that work up front. He could have used those sequences for the remainder of his tenure as an SDR. Because he shared it with the whole team, now he has to figure out new creative ways to stand out. And so, and it's a very taboo subject. It's always help out. And there's times for that. If there's another top performer, yes, you kind of need to reciprocate a little bit. But yeah, if you've spent 3 months or 4 months on building out all your systems and your sequences, and even everybody figures out what their system is. And so this is also why we tell people, you don't just go in expecting that somebody's going to give it to you, right? And everybody can say, why aren't they sharing anything? But deep down, we're all competing with each other, and you got to be intelligent. You got to be smart. I know that that's a very taboo subject, but
we're the only ones calling it it is. I mean,
you're competing with everybody else internally to get that promotion, right? And it's fun in the moment to share all those different things with your peers until now you're both standing there gunning for the same spot, and all those other people would not have been there if you wouldn't have shared all the shit that you worked on for 4 or 5 months. And so now, anyway,
we can get pretty deep in it,
but it's a good point. So you got to be selfish at times. You don't have to be the strictly lone wolf that just doesn't do anything ever, but you don't have to give away the keys to the castle.
So no, really good point. I guess I think we had one more. That was a good segue.
I think that's it, really. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and I think the last one was just kind of the upward mobility at the company. I would say really maybe just re-emphasize on that, because I don't want people to leave this podcast thinking actually, yeah, I can't get promoted at my company. So maybe I should leave. So like, maybe just reemphasize there that don't be dumb.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest with you, like, use critical thinking. If you are gonna, it's a tough conversation because you have to start thinking that way. When you finally do, then it's too late.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're like, I've been here for a year and 3 months. Like, I've already put in so much time. Like, you kind of like, it's a tough position, but I would say you got to kind of put yourself back in the driver's seat, because that's when you really start like losing love for what you went into.
Yeah.
Like, you just get drained, you lose out of energy, or you just don't want to do it anymore. Totally. Right. It's not fun anymore. And you're like, am I even a good fit for this? It's not possible to move up. And so I think instead of like putting all that mental drain on yourself for another year or so, really think, is this worth it for me? Or is it better if I go somewhere else that has a proven track record of moving up, even if I have to like go at the expense of maybe 6 months?
Yeah.
Right. But that is a real conversation that you have to have. And we can't answer whether or not you should do that. All we can say is that we've seen it go both ways. We've seen people make that jump, be much happier, get promoted much faster than what they thought, move into a senior role. We've also seen people that endure it, stick it out, eventually get promoted, and then leave. So it's not easy, man, but you got to ask yourself the question. You can't just like, sit back and be like, it's going to happen eventually. I'm just going to like stick it out, even though I hate it. So
no, and I think I'd add perspective. I mean, I know the premise of this episode was about why most SDRs won't get promoted, and I think we've covered that. But I also want to mention, like, this is a skill set, and this kind of gamesmanship, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe that's too strong. I don't want to. Anyway, but like this also paid dividends for me as an account executive. And in the example I mentioned towards the beginning of this episode, like, just to give everyone perspective as well, we have a podcast conversation with a director of business development at a hot cybersecurity company, and he talks about all the things that when he says, hey, there's going to be a promotion in 6 months, he shed light on what that takes, and he's lost some of his best reps because they didn't believe him. So that's a great conversation. I'll link that in the description. But also I want to add, like, to your point, like, again, the point of this is not saying jump ship if you're in that situation. And I will tell you, I benefited immensely in the case where I was stuck in the same role for a year and 3 months. I had every database and cloud infrastructure company hitting me up because I won President's Club 2 years in a row. I was vastly exceeding quota, and my OTE was rather low. It was 110 at the time. I'm getting offers for 150. I'm getting offers for 170 and 190 at dog shit startups, but 150 at some of the biggest brands in the world, because this is very early in my career. But with my 110 OTE, I almost hit 170 alone. And I actually was like, you know what? Like, right now, I'm still milking it, and I can work 4 to 6 hours a day and drastically exceed my quota. And I'm not saying that like ever get content by any means, but it's like when you factor in the fact that I was making like 170 with all my commission, and I would have jumped ship to a new place at 150, that's going to take me 6 to 9 months to develop a new workflow. When also here now, because I've hit President's Club 2 years in a row, I've got the leverage to go to my VP and say, hey, you promote me or I'm out. And there's a very much better way to do that. But I got that leverage. I got the title promotion from SMBAE to mid-market. And now fast forward 7 to 8 months later, I'm not going from 110 to 150 externally. I'm going from an even higher starting point at my current company as a mid-market account executive. And the offers are now coming in anywhere from 225 to 275. And that's a 6-month waiting period. And again, obviously results will vary. Like, that's not a guaranteed thing. But I also think, to your point and some of the things that we've said, if you do get in a good system, you are building right relationships, and you can work 4 hours a day for 6 months, and you have a lot of time to go to the gym, you have a lot of time to pursue a hobby. Sometimes it's good to just be in a bit of a holding pattern and really like get more leverage, assuming you're doing all the things that we talked about and have that in place. So man, maybe that's a part 2. I don't know. I feel like I could talk about that forever. So
honestly, on that last point, I will say too, like, I think it's also how you do it, because I see a lot of people that will go through that whole process and then like never do anything with it. But it's like you have the leverage, but you're not presenting it. Like the hiring manager or like, the AE manager is not just sitting there like waiting for you to like, I don't know, like they don't know what's going on. Right. And so you're the one that has to present your case. And so like there's been a lot of cases where people will do all this stuff. They'll start interviewing externally, and then they finally get an offer, and then they don't even bother trying. Like, give the ultimatum internally. And a lot of the times when you do that, we've actually seen positive results from it too. But it's all about how you present it.
100%.
Right? If you walk up and you're like, hey, look, like, here's the situation. When I went into tech sales, I wanted to go into it because I wanted to be an account executive. I've been crushing it here, but I gotta like look out for myself, my family. I have an offer on the table over here at this other startup. It's XYZ dollars. I really want to stay here. See what they say. Like, sometimes people don't even do that, and they don't give themselves the option or chance, or they don't give their own company the option or chance to react to it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like, people won't react until there is a situation where it's literally like, hey, they're going to leave.
Yeah. And I'd also add too on that note, it's like, you're absolutely correct. You will have to get to those ultimatums. But also, I think, quite frankly, like, if you're younger in your career, and just generally speaking, if you haven't built up communication skills, like, this is something that doesn't just come to this one head of like, I have an offer, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
This is something that you can start to force the issue methodically and respectfully with more intensity over the course of 6 to 9 months, right? And I think that's one of the biggest symptoms I've seen as well with SDRs who want to promote. They make that irrational decision and they're like gearing up in their head like, man, Tuesday I'm going to show up, I'm going to put this offer on Chris's desk and see how he reacts. And then in reality, that SDR manager who's managing 14 SDRs is like, fuck, man, like, why didn't you why didn't you tell me?
Yeah,
you know?
not being proactive.
Yeah. And it's like, if I knew you were looking elsewhere, we could have worked together for 6 months to develop a plan to say, hey, hit these tangibles. And now your SDR manager, who would love to promote you otherwise, but can't because literally the CRO just isn't allocating budget for a new AE, he can now go in his quarterly meeting with the CRO and say, hey, this guy's our top performer. He's going to be a killer AE. Like, we need headcount for this guy. He's a flight risk. Like, those are conversations that are happening behind closed doors. So I would just encourage anyone, I know it's an uncomfortable thing if it's your first time in sales, but your first year or two, like, if you're starting to earn the right to promote, it is on you to start consistently and respectfully broadcasting that is your clear intention over a ton of time. Because if you just drop something on their desk, it definitely can work. Don't get me wrong. But I just don't think people are doing enough to increase their odds and also be respectful of the entire situation end to end, what your manager is thinking about, what their VP is thinking about, what the CRO is thinking about, et cetera, et cetera. But
and
maybe
even,
that's a part 3. You know?
No, it's really good. It's a good riff because we didn't even really think about that when we first started. But I think I also hear a lot of like sales managers, they'll say that they didn't even know about the SDR until they started the interview process.
Yeah,
and so
true.
it's like,
that's true.
If you start reaching out to them conveniently, like once you put in your application for AE, like maybe there's an open headcount and you're competing with like a bunch of other folks. Like, if that is when you start reaching out to the sales manager, it's kind of like, they can kind of see right through it. Like, obviously you're doing the right things, right? Because most people don't even do that. They just go through it. So like, you're already a step ahead there. But if you started doing these things before an open headcount like opened up, one, you have an opportunity where it's like, they'll just say, let's get them in. They've already voiced to me that they want to move up. That's like, why would I go through an extensive interview process and use energy and resources when I have a person right here that's voiced to me that they want to move up, and I know they're crushing it, I know they're doing well. That happens a lot too. So like, really stack the odds in your favor, like, be proactive. I mean, there's a lot of things here. Like, there's never really a perfect path to AE, but I think also a lot of people, they wait until it's too late and then they'll say, this is why I didn't get promoted, that's why I didn't get promoted, blah, 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 blah. And how would you know? You don't know until you've actually been in it, right?
Exhausted every
option.
But
it just stings.
So 100%. No, this is great, man. And I'd say to everyone watching too, like, comment below. We know this is deep. Like, so if you have questions, you're an SDR looking to promote. Also, shout out, someone in our comments actually gave us audio feedback. So I hope this was a lot better. We changed our decibels. The mic's a lot closer to our face now. So I'm blanking on your name at the time. But again, guys, like, we monitor these comments directly. So fire away. And lastly, of course, like, we not only know this from our experience, but we coach hundreds of SDRs in our SDR to AE accelerator at higherlevels.com. If you've seen other podcasts too with Connor Murray from Oracle, he's actually one of our coaches as well, 5-time the MVP at Oracle, 2-time SDR manager. So it's not only do you have access to us, but we make a very strong point to get other top performers from all across the industry and continue to add perspectives. But man, this is deep. Anything else?
No, it was good. I mean, at the very least, if you enjoyed it, if you don't join and pay for our coaching, sell out. Make sure to at least like subscribe and like. So that really helps us out a lot. And, you know, it's good stuff. But yeah, we appreciate you guys.
Pay for our course.
Self-plug.
We'll see you guys.
Peace.